The planet has gone through cataclysmic changes recently. If you are a business owner, you must reinvent your brand, operations, and strategic plans to work in the new norm. Please stay with us to learn how. Hello, I'm Bruce Stout, and I am the host of this series. Business owners and management teams are faced with serious new challenges: an uncertain economy, changes in societal norms, a major move to an online presence, and new trends in buying habits have changed all of the rules. On this series, experts in finance, law, marketing, strategic planning, and other fields share their expertise and experience to guide you through the minefields created by the new norm. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Steve Maggi. He is the owner of the SMA law firm. He is an expert on immigration, and he will tell us about the most recent immigration rules affecting companies and entrepreneurs. What were the trends in regards to visa issuances and immigration petitions before the pandemic?
Believe it or not, there actually was a trend downward in terms of visa issuances. So on average, there was about a 15% drop in visa issuances per year from the time the Trump administration began until right now. And so that discouraged foreign entrepreneurs and business owners from applying for visas, which led to a further decrease in applications. And so I would say overall, there was a downward trend in terms of the number of visas that were issued.
Was business and investment from foreign nationals decreasing or increasing?
So the number of investors and investment in the U.S. has actually been decreasing because the number of visas has been also decreasing due to denials. And so what that leads to is a self-perpetuating situation where there's less and less investment because entrepreneurs are scared to risk their investment here. And it's important to note that there are about 8 million U.S. jobs that have been created by foreign-owned businesses and entrepreneurs. And that number is dropping steadily each year, and it was dropping before the pandemic.
Let's switch gears and talk about the changes that have occurred in immigration laws and policies since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. What effect does that have on foreign nationals doing business in the U.S.?
It has an incredible effect, Bruce. We're talking about more changes in the past 4 months, in other words, the first half of 2020, than we had in the previous 3 years under the Trump administration. And what that does is discourage foreign entrepreneurs and business owners from launching in the U.S. because there are so many barriers in place, both legal and physical.
Let's start with the travel ban. What is it and how is it affecting business?
Well, the travel ban's been in place for upwards of 3 months now, and there's no way of knowing actually when it will be lifted. And what that means is that there's no free flow of business, and that includes the flow of business people, entrepreneurs, and highly skilled professionals that need to come back and forth or to enter the U.S. in order to make the businesses here progress and function correctly and generate profits. And so it's had a very, very profound effect, essentially stalling a lot of businesses that are international in nature, especially ones that are subsidiaries here of foreign companies that really need to move their executives and managers and engineers and essential employees to the U.S. in order to grow their businesses here, which leads to more U.S. job creation.
Steve, what's the impact of the shutdown of U.S. embassies and consulates?
So the short-term impact is already being felt, and there's no way to really be able to judge how deep the impact will be long-term until we know when this ban will actually stop, and that means when the U.S. embassies and consulates are reopened. Right now, you're talking about millions of visas that are issued per year, and if this is projected over the course of 9 months, you're talking about over 1 million visas that won't be issued. And that includes a lot of business visitors that are setting up business here or conducting business with U.S. companies. That includes tourists that come from the U.S., come from outside the U.S., that obviously are generating a lot of revenue for the hotel industry, for travel, for destinations like Florida, for example, that's essentially paralyzed. And then most importantly, what I feel the impact in what I do is the entrepreneurs that can't get their visas right now because there are no interviews. A lot of these embassies and consulates are not even accepting petitions for entrepreneurial visas, and we're talking about over 100,000 visas per year that are issued. So for example, we have a Japanese steakhouse client that has already built out their space. They have a rental agreement that's $15,000 a month, and their kitchen manager and general manager are stuck in Japan waiting for their interview. In the meantime, they've lost already 4 months of potential revenue, haven't been able to hire all the US workers that they want to, and it's possible that they could go out of business before they open their doors. And that's happening if you multiply it over lots of businesses. That's happening in thousands of cases right now because of the shutdown of the US embassies and consulates. So this is having a huge impact.
Steve, tell us about the shutdown of the borders between the US, Mexico, and Canada.
Well, I'm not an economist, so I don't know the numbers exactly or how to explain them in terms of what it does to trade. But obviously our closest trading partners are the ones that share our borders. That's Canada and Mexico. And right now there's a very gray area in terms of what can actually be brought in, what can be transported into the United States, and who's allowed to come in. And so I think that that's leading to increased prices in the United States because of these extra barriers. But on top of that, what people don't think about is how many professionals come to the US through the borders under what's called the TN visa, the Treaty National Visa, which is exclusively for Mexican and Canadian nationals. They don't have to process their visas at US embassies and consulates, so they don't have that barrier. They usually do it at border crossings. And right now, because those border crossings are closed except for people who are essential, they're not able to come into the United States. And that causes a domino effect because the companies that are hiring them need them now, which is why they're applying now. And that leads to a breakdown in the way that companies are functioning in the United States and doesn't lead to further job creation that really is a byproduct of all these professionals that are coming in through the Canadian and Mexican border.
I understand there have been executive orders pausing certain kinds of immigration. What are those?
Wow, Bruce, so I don't know where to begin. I would say that, first of all, the executive order is something that's hard to explain, especially to someone who's not part of this legal system, because it puts the power of the pen in the hands of our president, and essentially that power is unchecked. So through executive orders, the president has been able to close the borders, has been able to initiate a travel ban that applies essentially to everyone except US citizens, green card holders, diplomats, and crew members, meaning stopping all traffic coming into the US for business personnel, for executives, for entrepreneurs. The scariest thing about them is that they can come at any time. They just need to be signed by the president, and they're entered into effect legally on the day that they're signed. And so now we have one executive order, for example, that is stopping or pausing the issuance of immigrant visas. And that means people who are here sponsored for permanent placement into companies. But there's just a lot of speculation that any time now there could be more executive orders that could include L visas and H-1B visas, which are the principal visas used by companies to bring in foreign personnel that is highly skilled. And those are positions that cannot be filled right now by US citizens, especially the ones that are transfers of employees from overseas. That's a requirement for L1 visa. If that were to happen, that could cause a huge, huge impact for any company that's multinational, essentially, and for any US employer that really needs engineers and scientists on the ground here in the US, where there's a shortage for those skilled positions. So executive orders to me are the most powerful and frightening tool that exists right now. And there's no way to know how many of them will come out, what their effect will be. But it's something that's being wielded by the president whenever essentially he feels that it's necessary. And there's probably more to come.
Steve, I've heard also about the public charge rule. What is that?
The public charge rule is something that was really under the radar because of all the things we've heard about the pandemic. It's been sort of snuck in. It was actually upheld by the Supreme Court. And just imagine if you heard that some of the grounds for discrimination on an employment level, for example, were somehow okay if they were implemented and applied by a US immigration official. Essentially, that's what the public charge allows immigration officials to do. It allows them to deny a benefit to any foreign national, which could include a visa or what's called a change of status, any way to stay legally in the US, or to adjust, which means to get a permanent residence or eventually to become US citizens. If they have ever received any public benefit whatsoever, and there's a long list, an exhaustive list of potential public charges, but also the most frightening aspect is that it could also be grounds for denial based on a hypothetical, possible future need for the access to public benefits. And that includes age, it includes education level, it includes profession, it includes finances. And so you're talking about essentially carte blanche for any immigration official to deny a immigration benefit to a foreign national. And that means that you could have families that are torn in half. You could have executives, for example, that run US companies that wouldn't be able to remain in the US and would have to shut down their businesses. For business owners, this is a very frightening proposition to face. And because we haven't had any cases that have actually been adjudicated on these grounds, we don't know what to expect either. And that's our most frightening enemy, is this invisible enemy as lawyers who are specialized in this field, is not knowing what we're facing. And so the public charge rule is under the radar, but it could cause a lot of problems, lead to a lot of foreign nationals being deported or not being able to enter the United States. And those individuals are crucial to the success of many US businesses.
Steve, let's now turn our attention to the post-COVID period. One question: how will what happened be shaped by the presidential elections?
Well, Bruce, it's hard to say. I'm a historian at heart, and I would venture to guess, as someone who loves history and who lives every day doing immigration law, that these are the most crucial elections that we've had since probably the post-Great Depression. And that especially has to do with immigrants and how they're treated. Immigrants have been essentially invisible with this administration, but now they're being used as a platform, as a sort of a scapegoat to advance other political agendas. And so I think that another 4 years of this administration would have a marked impact on the flow of business to the US, the investment levels that are coming in that are allowed, and especially the growth and the expansion of businesses into the United States like we've never seen before. And I say that because, as we spoke about, there's been a steady decline in investment as well as the issuance of visas over the last 3 years. And now there's essentially a pause on immigration that's happened through this executive order. Mm-hmm. And so the presidential election and who is president or becomes president will shape the next 4 years and possibly the next generation for business owners, especially those who are hiring foreign nationals or businesses that are owned by foreign nationals.
I don't know how good your crystal ball is. Mine's a little cloudy. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 4 years.
Very interesting. I hope that my crystal ball is pretty accurate. I foresee a lot of positive changes coming through this crisis, but also on an immigration level, I think that the administration will realize how important immigrant dollars are, innovation, ideas, and I think that the issuance of visas will go up and the amount of investment will go up. And I think the next 10 years will be very strong, actually.
Steve, we'll have you back in 4 years.
Sounds good, Bruce. Anytime.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us too. Please tune in for our next episode of Doing Business in the USA, The New Reality. This is Bruce Stout, wishing you a great day.